Hello folks, just going to talk you through what I did for Project 2. I decided to make a Snooker scoreboard app for this. So starting out with my initial sketch, went through a few rough ideas and then came up with this. And here I've tried to highlight all the individual views using red. So there's the main background image, then a series of text views at the top for the title, the players, then the scores for each player separated by this horizontal line, which would just be a view. Beneath that, a series of buttons and text views for each of the various coloured balls. So the circles on either side of those text views represent buttons that could be pressed to add points to each player. Beneath that, one thing that hadn't been covered in the course but I thought would be useful to add to this would be an undo button. In case you make a mistake, press the wrong ball, an undo button there to remove the last points that were added. And finally at the bottom, a reset button to reset the scores of both players. So from that, I started to think about what are the various view groups that would be needed and how best to lay this out. So this diagram sort of shows the idea that I had, to use a relative layout initially. That would include an image view for the background, and then all the other views would be contained within this vertical linear layout, and then broken down further into a vertical linear layout for the title, with the Snooker and Scoreboard text views. Then beneath that, a horizontal linear layout with the two players. Beneath that, another horizontal linear layout with the two scores and this horizontal line. Then beneath that, a series of horizontal linear layouts with a button, then a text view, and then another button. So we'd have 7 of those, one for each of the coloured balls. And beneath that, another horizontal linear layout with the 2 undo buttons, and then finally at the bottom, a single button on its own, the reset button. So once I'd worked all that out, I went across to Android Studio and started building up my XML. And once I'd done, this is what the preview screen looked like. So everything's in there as I planned. I haven't loaded up the image drawable yet for the background, but obviously my first concern was that there's not a lot of space here. I haven't done any formatting to the text and the scores to make this text larger and more visible, so once I start doing that I'm going to quickly run out of space. So I had to go back and kind of reevaluate how I was going to lay all this out on the screen. So I went back and modified my structure here. For the buttons for each of the balls, and then the undo buttons, I had them each in separate horizontal linear layouts. Now I've decided to move them all, instead of having one big long row of 8 buttons, I'd move those into 2 columns of 4 buttons for each person. So that works out into a horizontal linear layout comprised of 2 separate horizontal linear layouts, one for each player, and each of those has 2 vertical linear layouts of 4 buttons. The other small change I made was with the scores and the horizontal line. Some initial attempts at playing around with that, I wasn't able to centralize the score within its relative half of the screen, if that makes sense, and also have the horizontal line in between, using a horizontal linear layout. So I've changed that to a relative layout, which includes a horizontal linear layout for the 2 score text views, and then the view, which is the horizontal line, is relative to those 2 views. Going back into Android Studio, and this was the result. So we're pretty happy with that. It's got everything I want on there. lots of space for formatting, and yeah. So I went ahead and did all my formatting. I'm not going to talk you through exactly what I did there, it's not overly interesting, but we'll jump across to Android Studio, and this was my final result. Just looking at the XML to start with, I won't go through all of this. I don't think there's anything too new or exciting that hadn't been covered in the course previously. I hadn't used any new attributes or anything that I hadn't used before, so nothing too exciting there. One thing that I was conscious to try and do was utilize the values folder. So within the colors XML, I've identified any colors that I'm using in my app here. Likewise with dimensions, this was a big one for this app. So the margin and padding around the buttons for the balls, I've defined this dimension here. So if I ever wanted to move these buttons closer together or further away, I only have to change that one dimension instead of 16, one for each of these buttons. And so it really kind of highlights the value of using these XMLs to define these sorts of things. The other thing I defined here was the styles for each of the fonts. Jumping across to the Java, and in this app I've got 4 different variables, 2 score variables for each player. This was to allow my undo button to function. So I've got a current score and an old score for each player. Initialized all of those at 0. Then we have the method to display the score for player A. This is basically just copied across from the example basketball score app from earlier in the course. And then I have a series of methods for adding points for each of the balls, starting with player A. So this first one is to add 1 point for player A for the red ball. So what this does is takes the old score and sets it equal to the current score, and they're both 0 at the moment. Then sets the current score to the current score plus 1, and then displays the new current score, which would be 1, and our old score is 0. Say then, moving on to the next method, if the player A then pots the yellow ball, this old score is equal to the current score, so the old score is now 1. Our current score has 2 points added to it, so that's the value of the yellow ball, and is now displayed on the screen, which would be 3. And our old score is 1. So then these methods are repeated for each of the balls, all the way down up to 7 points for the black ball. And then we come to the undo button method. So this takes the current score and sets it to the old score. So it reverts the current score, which is 3, our old score is 1, it now makes the current score 1 again, and displays that to the screen. Obviously you can only undo once, so you can only undo the most recent points that are added, nothing further than that. I haven't quite worked out how you could do that yet, but potentially I could look into that later. Then all the methods are repeated for player B, and finally we have the reset method. So it just sets all the scores back to 0 and displays them on the screen. And that's pretty much it for what I've done so far. I've got a few ideas of how to improve the app, actually things I'd like to add, and those were sort of beyond what we'd already been taught in the course, so I'm going to have to go away and research how to do them myself. Maybe post again once I've worked them out and tried to add them. Okay, thanks for watching.